Tens of thousands of people wearing red surrounded the White House on Saturday, carrying a 2-mile-long banner bearing the names of over 40,000 Palestinians killed by Israel in the last 8 months. Similar marches took place on the West Coast and around the world. The protesters wore red to symbolize the red line that Joe Biden declared in an interview when he said that the U.S. would stop sending weapons to Israel if they invaded Rafah. Since that interview, there have been 4 separate Israeli massacres in Rafah, and the U.S. has not only continued to send weapons to Israel, they also coordinated with Israel to stage a raid into Nusayrat refugee camp, which killed over 270 Palestinians, and had them use the floating pier they built in Gaza, which they said was for delivering humanitarian aid. The Biden administration is hoping that voters will look past all this come election season, but this seems unlikely. According to recent polling data, 61% of Americans no longer want the U.S. sending weapons or supplies to Israel. For Americans under 30, that number jumps to a whopping 77%. Biden's support among Arab American voters, who tend to live in key battleground states, is currently just under 20%, a staggering 40% lower than the 60% of Arab American voters that voted for him in the 2020 election. Polls of black voters showed that 1 in 6 was considering withholding their vote for Biden as a form of protest. The American Methodist Episcopal Church, one of the oldest and most influential institutions for black Americans, called for an end to all financial aid to Israel in February, and just last week, the NAACP called on the Biden administration to end all weapons shipments to Israel. All of this has brought Joe Biden's approval rating to the lowest point of his presidency. With Israel facing war crimes tribunals in multiple international courts, and countries around the world moving to distance themselves from Israel or sever ties entirely, Joe Biden now finds himself completely alone in his full-throated defense of this international pariah state, while he faces off against an unprecedented mass movement for Palestine that's pledged only to deepen its commitment.
We're not even going to say they're complicit anymore. They are directly responsible for the murder of Palestinians in Gaza. They are committing the genocide. It's not just Zionism. It's not just the Zionists. It's this empire here. It's this country here. What we've done so far has been historic. I never thought in my lifetime that I would see a Palestinian movement this strong. But we still need to do more.
Having lost the battle over public opinion, some politicians have resorted to slander to try to scare people away from the movement and get it shut down. Senator Tom Cotton called on the Department of Justice to investigate the protests at the White House, trying to associate the movement with terrorism. The desperation in the ruling class is a reflection of their fear and a testament to the effectiveness of the movement.
Biden says that he wants a permanent ceasefire. These people here in red, the movement for Palestine, has forced him to admit that as the President of the United States, he has no other option but to say that he wants a ceasefire. We did that.
The UN Security Council just passed a resolution sponsored by the United States for a ceasefire in Gaza. The proposal is almost identical to the proposal that the Palestinian resistance accepted weeks ago, and Hamas has, once again, expressed openness to the deal, contrary to the Biden administration's insistence that Hamas is the one holding up the deal. Biden knows that the vast majority of Americans in the world want to see this genocide end, which is why he's giving it lip service, but people haven't been fooled by that. So far, there hasn't been a ceasefire because Israel's opposed to any ceasefire deal that would keep them from returning to war as soon as they get their captives back. If Biden actually wanted a ceasefire, he could pick up the phone tomorrow and tell Netanyahu that his red line is going into effect, that Israel won't get another bullet out of American taxpayers, and that he needs to accept the deal immediately. The protest ended with a people's tribunal, where a panel of lawyers and experts put together a detailed legal case against Biden, Netanyahu, Yoav Gallant, Lloyd Austin, and Antony Blinken for their crimes against humanity. After reading hours of testimony from people in Gaza, the panel found these 5 guilty on all charges. It's a stark reminder that while Biden tries to posture as the peacemaker 8 months into his own genocide, for millions of people, Joe Biden's legacy was sealed a long time ago.
Israel's actions and words have become their own undoing, their own confession of guilt. We have spent hours together here, and yet we know that we have only scratched the surface of the charges that we could find Israel and the U.S. guilty of perpetrating. Israel's actions are a stain on humanity. Our freedom is intertwined with Palestinian freedom because those that oppress and fund their death are the same bodies that steal our taxes to fund injustice abroad. We are unafraid and unrelenting. We will continue to fight, continue to disrupt, continue to agitate until total and complete liberation for all oppressed peoples.